Eyre Chapter 12, Part 2. The other members of the household, viz. Jean and his wife, Leah the housemaid, and Sophie the French nurse, were decent people, but in no respect remarkable. With Sophie I used to talk French, and sometimes I asked her questions about her native country, but she was not of a descriptive or narrative turn, and generally gave such vapid and confused answers as were calculated rather to check than encourage inquiry. October, November, December passed away. One afternoon in January, Mrs. Fairfax had begged a holiday for Adele because she had a cold, and as Adele seconded the request with an ardor that reminded me how precious occasional holidays had been to me in my own childhood, I accorded it, deeming that I did well in showing pliability to the point. It was a fine, calm day, though very cold. I was tired of sitting still in the library through a whole long morning. Mrs. Fairfax had just written a letter which was waiting to be posted, so I put on my bonnet and cloak and volunteered to carry it to Hay. The distance, 2 miles, would be a pleasant winter afternoon walk. Having seen Adele comfortably seated in her little chair by Mrs. Fairfax's parlor fireside, and given her her best wax doll, which I usually kept enveloped in silver paper in a drawer to play with, and a storybook to change for amusement, and having replied to her "Recevez-vous bien mon bonnet à ma chère Mademoiselle Jeannette" with a kiss, I set out. The ground was hard, the air was still, my road was lonely. I walked fast till I got warm, and then I walked slowly to enjoy and analyze the species of pleasure brooding for me in the hour and situation. It was 3 o'clock. The church bell tolled as I passed under the belfry. The charm of the hour lay in the approaching dimness and the low gliding and pale beaming sun. I was a mile from Thornfield in a lane noted for wild roses in summer, for nuts and blackberries in autumn, and even now possessing a few coral treasures in hips and haws, but those best winter delights lay in the utter solitude and leafless repose. If a breath of air stirred, it made no sound here, for there was not a holly, not an evergreen to rustle, and the stipendied hawthorn and hazel bushes were as still as the white worn stones which causewayed the middle of the path. Far and wide on each side, there were only fields where no cattle now browsed, and the little brown birds which stirred occasionally in the hedge looked like single rusted leaves that had forgotten to drop. This lane inclined uphill all the way to Hay. Having reached the middle, I sat down on a stile which led thence into a field. Gathering my mantle about me and sheltering my hands in my muff, I did not feel the cold, though it froze keenly, as was attested by a sheet of ice covering the causeway, where a little brooklet now congealed had overflowed after a rapid thaw some days since. From my seat, I could look down on Thornfield. The gray embattlement hall was the principal object in the vale below me. Its woods and dark rookery rose against the west. I lingered till the sun went down amongst the trees and sank crimson and clear behind them, and then turned eastward. On the hilltop above me sat the rising moon, pale yet as a cloud, but brightening momently. She looked over Hay, which, half lost in trees, sent up a blue smoke from its few chimneys. It was yet a mile distant, but in the absolute hush I could hear plainly its thin murmurs of life. My ear, too, felt the flow of currents. In what dales and depths I could not tell. But there were many hills beyond Hay, and doubtless many becks threading their passes. That evening, calm betrayed alike the tinkle of the nearest streams, the sough of the most remote. A rude noise broke on the fine ripplings and whisperings, at once so far away and so clear a positive tramp, a metallic clatter which effaced the soft wave wanderings, as in a picture the solid mass of a crag or the rough boles of a great oak drawn in the dark and strong of the foreground, effaced the aerial distance of azure hill, sunny horizon, and blended clouds, where tint melts into tint. The din was on the causeway. A horse was coming. The windings of the lane yet hid it, but it approached. I was just leaving the stile, yet as the path was narrow, I sat still to let it go by. In those days I was young, and all sorts of fancies, bright and dark, tenanted my mind. The memories of nursery stories were there amongst other rubbish, and when they recurred, maturing youth added to them a vigor and vividness beyond what childhood could give. As this horse approached, and as I watched for it to appear through the dusk, I remembered certain of Bessie's tales, wherein figured a North of England spirit called Gytrash, which, in the form of horse, mule, or large dog, haunted solitary ways and sometimes came upon belated travelers, as this horse was now coming upon me. It was very near, but not yet in sight, when in addition to the tramp, I heard a rush under the hedge, and close down by the hazel stems glided by a great dog, whose black and white color made him a distinct object against the trees. It was exactly one mask of Bessie's Gytrash, a lion-like creature with long hair and a huge head. It passed me, however, quietly enough, not staying to look up with strange pretercanine eyes in my face as I half expected it should. The horse followed, a tall steed, and on its back a rider. The man, the human being, broke the spell at once. Nothing ever rode the Gritesh. It was always alone, and goblins, to my notions, though they might tenant the dumb carcasses of beasts, could scarce cover shelter in the commonplace human form. No Gritesh was this, only a traveler taking the shortcut to Milket. He passed, and I went on. A few steps, and I turned, a sliding sound and an exclamation of, "What the deuce is it to do now?" And a clattering tumble arrested my attention. Man and horse were down. They had slipped on the sheet of ice which glazed the causeway. The dog came bounding back, and seeing his master in a predicament, and hearing the horseman groan, barked till the evening hills echoed the sound, which was deep in the proportion to this magnitude. He snuffed round the prostrate group, and then he ran up to me. It was all he could do. There was no other to help at hand to summon. I obeyed him and walked down to the traveler, by this time struggling himself free of his steed. His efforts were so vigorous I thought he could not be much hurt, but I asked him the question. "Are you injured, sir?" I think he was swearing, but am not certain. However, he was pronouncing some formula which prevented him from replying to me directly. "Can I do anything?" I asked. "You must just stand on one side," he answered as he rose, first to his knees and then to his feet. I did, whereupon began a heaving, stamping, clattering process, accompanied by a barking and baying which removed me effectually some yards distance, but I would not be driven quite away till I saw the event. This was finally fortunate. The horse was re-established, and the dog was silenced with a "Down, pilot!" The traveler, now stooping, felt his foot and leg as if trying whether they were sound. Apparently something ailed them, for he halted to the stile whence I had just risen and sat down. I was in the mood for being useful, or at least officious, I think, for I now drew near to him again. "If you are hurt and want help, sir, I can fetch some one either from Thornfield Hall or from Hay." "Thank you, I shall do. I have no broken bones, only a sprain." And again he stood up and tried his foot, but the result extorted an involuntary "Ugh!"